Hello! So, back again for another video. Like I said in my last one, as promised, this one I want to talk about what the fundamentals are, or at least what I think they are, and then link some resources so that you can get some other people's opinions on what the fundamentals are. So, I'll just list them out real quick for you. I think line is one of them. I think shape is one of them. I think form is one of them. And I think value is one of them. And I say these are the fundamentals, at least in my mind, because they supersede art styles or art subjects. And you can apply them to anything in any style. Whether you want to draw characters or environments, or maybe you don't want to draw, maybe you have like a more painterly style that you're going for and you want to paint something. I think these are all still very useful and very applicable. So the first one, line, that's probably the most specific to the art that I'm kind of drawn to. I'm really drawn to a lot of pen and ink type work, comic book type work, stuff that has lines around it. More painterly styles, you wouldn't use line so much. You might use it for maybe underdrawings or something like that. But I still think the concept is applicable. It just shows up differently, right? And when we look at real life objects, like I'm looking at my desk here, it doesn't have a line around it. There are no lines in the real world. So lines are something that we use or that we make just for art, basically. And in more painterly styles, they tend to use edges, so you can blend stuff together, blend some color and some value, and get soft and hard edges. So it's a little different. I think the underlying concept is similar. Again, I think it's a fundamental because it's what I'm drawn to, and it's how I make stuff. It's how I draw. I use lines. That's like the basis for everything for me. And even if it's not going to be the basis for something you want to do, I think it's still a useful tool to have in your arsenal to learn the other fundamentals. So, shape being the next one, that is something that shows up everywhere. And when I say shape, I just mean the flattened 2D shape of an object. So when we look at objects, right, they're 3D in the real world. Imagine looking at it through a picture plane or just looking at a picture of an object. It has a 2D shape. So that shows up, like I said, everywhere. If you want to draw or paint or sculpt or represent something, it has a shape to it, right? A human figure, the whole figure altogether has a shape. In art, they would maybe call that like the contour shape or the contour lines, but you can just think of it as a shape. And especially if you go down a rabbit hole of kind of more stylistic stuff, shape tends to become more important in like design language and stuff like that. So I think that's a fundamental, and not just the shape of objects and learning how to see those and draw those, but also the shape of the negative space or the shapes where the object isn't, because that'll help you better represent where the object is. Because if you can draw the shape of the object and the shape of the negative spaces accurately, you can accurately draw the object. And that would really put you well on your way to being able to draw stuff that you can see or that you have pictures of. And beyond that, as you get more advanced, it really helps, like I said, with kind of design aspects or simplifying stuff, because the more advanced you get, the more decisions basically that you have to make about, oh, this looks kind of like that, but I want the shape to be like this, things like that. But before all that, just being able to recognize them and draw shapes is fundamental. And the only thing that it doesn't do is, or one of the things that it does, is it tends to make things look flat. Like I said, if you're looking at a picture of something, it just has a 2D shape. It's a flat image. And a lot of times when we're making art, whether it's drawing or painting or whatever, we're trying to represent a 3D space. We're trying to fool people, right, into looking at our 2D picture and convincing them that it's a real 3-dimensional space. That's kind of, at least for me, what I think it's all about, I guess. You know, not what it's all about per se, but what you're trying to accomplish. And to convince people of the reality of your art, or the 3-dimensionality of it, you need the third fundamental I mentioned, which is form. You might also hear it called structure. And basically what that is just the 3D-ness of objects. So I mentioned shape, right? Flat and 2D. So a square is a shape. A cube is a form. They're different things, but they're very similar. And what the cube does that the square doesn't is it shows the depth of the object, the 3D-ness of it. And in order to draw things that look really solid or really grounded in a reality, is that 3D-ness. So I think form would be my third fundamental. It sounds maybe intimidating. It doesn't need to be. There's really only a few different forms that exist, and then everything else is sort of just a manipulation on that. So it's nothing that needs to be too horrifying to tackle, but it is something that I think people tend to struggle with. I myself struggle with it and still struggle with it. Oh, why does this feel flat? So, but in a later video, I'll get into some resources for tackling each individual fundamental. So form will get its own thing. The last fundamental I mentioned is value, and that's just the lightness and darkness of things. And really what value is a what value is a representation of is light, like real world light. Again, like I said, when you're drawing something, you're trying to convince people of the reality of the thing that you're drawing. And one of the things you need to do that is light. And how you represent that is through value. So things in shadow will be darker, things in light will be brighter. There's some other rules to light that we can tackle in a value video, and I'll talk about some other resources and stuff then. But I think it's fundamental, I guess. I think it's super important if you want to get a very very real sense of depth to your drawings. And again, that depth is just kind of a sense of 3D-ness, a sense of realness, a sense of groundedness to your drawings. I think value is of key importance, but I don't think you need to overcomplicate it. You don't have to have a million different shades or anything like that. A lot of the artists that I really like and I'm drawn to are storyboard artists. A lot of the times they'll use like 3, maybe 5 values in their artwork just to add that extra little bit of depth. So, if you don't want to, you don't need to go incredibly complex with it where you have 50 different shades of every color and thing under the sun trying to get like realism. If you want to, you can. Not necessary. What I think is necessary is an understanding of value, where your lights are, where your darks are. And like I said, I'll jump in on another video and talk about some resources and ways to go about learning value specifically. You'll notice I didn't list color as one of my fundamentals, and that's just because I don't think it's necessary. I think that you can create art ranging from basically incredibly realistic to incredibly cartoony without ever using a single color. Whether that's black and gray charcoal drawings that are photorealistic, or whether it's black and white comics, like old newspaper comics. I don't think color is necessary. Again, if you want to make stuff with color, I think you totally should, and you should learn all about it. I do think color will not serve you very well if you do not understand value first. That's all I would say about it. But by no means do I think you shouldn't learn color or anything like that. I just don't think it falls into the same group of fundamentals. That's just one self-taught artist hot take, I guess. Don't take that as a rule or anything like that. Just my opinion, really. And I think if you're just trying to learn, you're better served focusing on the other fundamentals. I think you could get lost in color theory without really improving the quality of your art. Whereas if you focused on something like value, you could really elevate your art a lot without ever touching color. So, again, do with that what you want. I'm not a dictator or something. I don't own art. So those are all just my opinions, what I think of as the fundamentals. And really, more than that, what they are they're the things I wish I would have focused on when I was trying to learn. Because I didn't. And I'll probably say this in every video, but it held me back a fair amount, right? Because I was trying to learn how to draw the human head instead of trying to learn how to draw 3D forms and then use those to draw the human head. I was kind of going about it in the wrong order, right? The fundamental is the 3D forms. The human head is just something you can draw with that fundamental. But, I didn't know any better, and I was really just winging it, and that's why I'm making these videos. So that if you are just winging it, you can maybe have some helpful guidance, hopefully. In the description for this one, I'm going to leave a link to a Proko video where it's called like the basic elements. Kind of similar, what he considers the basic elements of drawing or art. You'll notice in his he has color, and he doesn't have line, he has edge. I think that's in line with what I said, right? A lot of artwork doesn't have lines in it because real things don't have lines around them. I just like pen and ink stuff, and it's how I draw. I draw stuff with lines. And if you want to draw anything, whether it's shapes or forms, you're going to have to make lines at some point. But I digress. Again, just my opinion. But I'll leave a link to his video, and he talks about kind of the basic elements of making art. And he's like an actually established art teacher, so he's not just one random dude. I will also link to a Bobby Chiu video where he talks about what he thinks the fundamentals of art are. Spoiler alert, he mentions structure, which is kind of like 3D form, kind of one and the same. I'd say they're like synonymous or interchangeably used. And he's an Emmy award-winning artist. He runs a website called Schoolism. Super great artist, super good art educator. So again, a little more weight behind the stuff he says, I think, than the stuff I say. And finally, I will leave a link to a Draftsmen podcast episode. The Draftsmen podcast is Stan Proko, the guy that does the Proko channel, and Marshall Vandruff, who is, again, a super well-established art teacher and, super well-respected. Worked for years and years and years as an artist and has taught for a very long time and has a lot of wisdom to share. Marshall Vandruff is awesome. he's my art hero. His love and passion for art and art instruction is just very contagious, I think. So they have a whole podcast episode called "What Are the Fundamentals?" and you can hear them just discuss it. If you listen to podcasts, if you're into that sort of thing. No pressure, just some other resources from some more well-established people. But I hope that this is helpful. I hope it can help guide you on your journey about maybe what you should start with and what you should focus on if you're trying to really get a grasp of this whole drawing art thing. Yeah. Until the next one. Peace.